The Army may be getting to the bottom of all this talk about the so-called flying saucer. As a matter of fact, the 509th Atomic Bomb Group headquarters at Roswell, New Mexico, reports that it has received one of the discs which landed on a ranch outside Roswell. The disc landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico, and the rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brazel was the man who discovered the saucer.
Hi. Good morning, Mr. Brazel.
Mr. Yowie, how are you?
Nice to meet you, sir.
Gosh, you've got a lot of people.
先入観を与えないため、ブラーゼル氏が話し終えるまで、マセール博士には黙っていてもらうことにした。
I was not out at the ranch at the time, and I picked up an Albuquerque paper, and here's my dad's picture looking at me, and I thought, well, I wonder what he's done now. So I went on to read the article, and I told Shirley, I said, well, I guess I better go out to the ranch, because they said that the Air Force had asked him to stay in Roswell. Anyway, they swore dead to secrecy, and I went out to the ranch and stayed until he got back, and I asked him what he'd got into, and he says, I found a bunch of trash, and so he went on to tell me it was a bunch of sticks and twine string, he says. And he said on some of these sticks, why, there was, he says, Japanese or Chinese figures, you know. Mm-hmm. And, of course, he couldn't even start to show me what it was like, you know. Mm-hmm. And I kept asking him questions, and he said, I told the Air Force I wouldn't tell anybody. He said, you're probably better off without knowing. He did show me where he had found this wreckage. Mm-hmm. And of course, riding horseback, you see lots of things, you know. So I'd go back through there, and naturally I was kind of looking. And then I picked up a few scraps, and that the Army hadn't picked up. And I made them in. I'd bring them in my Shap's pocket and put them in a cigar box down at the barn. But the little scraps, I happen to call it the wood, was kind of like balsa wood. Mm-hmm. It was real light and kind of a neutral color. Mm-hmm. And pieces of string or something like monofilament fishing line. Mm-hmm. And then the foil, like tin foil or lead foil, but you couldn't crease it and make it stay. And I only had one little jagged piece of it. And you bend it over, make a crease, and it'd straighten right back out. Mm. And it wouldn't, I don't know, it had to hit with a terrific force because you couldn't cut that wood or the string or the foil. Mm-hmm. And it wouldn't burn. That wood was real pliable. Oh. And, but it wouldn't break. Mm-hmm. It was something, I don't know, felt like balsa wood, real light, you know. And of course, that was kind of before the days of plastic. Right. So it could have been some type of plastic, I don't know. Mm. An odd shape, kind of a jagged piece. And the whole area wasn't as large as that ashtray. Maybe half that. Yes. But it was, like you just tear a piece of paper or something, you know. Uh-huh. And,
but you couldn't do that.
So I say it must have hit with a terrific force to have even broken the frame parts or tore this foil, because I couldn't tear it. I didn't really get pliers or anything and try that hard, you know.
Except I didn't try to tear it myself.
Well,
I just picked it up.
like you said, I just tried with my fingers. I didn't tear it.
I know my dad said he tried to tear it and tried to deform it with hammers, but impossible.
And how was the thickness of?
Well, it was pretty thin.
Like what?
Well, like aluminum foil that's used today to wrap frozen material.
Was it the same as?
About the same thing, yeah.
How was the edge of the balsa-like material?
The edge?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Was it
of course, the ends of the pieces I found were kind of jagged. But the edge of the piece lengthwise was smooth.
Oh, that's the same?
Yeah, to me, it resembled an I-beam, a small I-beam, that it was fractured on each end. And it was on the inner surface of that where the writing was located.
Oh, I see.
The longest piece I saw was about 18 inches in length.
I didn't find anything that large. Mine is, maybe 3 inches, probably the longest piece that I found.
Don't you have any question to Mr. Brazel?
Well, it sounds like you and I saw the same thing.
Well,
I'm sure.
well, I'm sure it was.
On July 2nd, this rancher, Mack Brazel, saw something crash in a field outside town. Brazel died in 1963, having kept a pledge to the Air Force to keep secret the story of what really happened in this field. Brazel talked to only one person about those events, his son, Bill, now 60 years old. He told him that whatever crashed here was something he could not identify.
According to my dad, there was a bad thunderstorm the night before. The next day he was out on the ranch and he found this debris. And he picked it all up in his pickup and was talking to people. And, of course, there was some talk about UFOs. He was going to Roswell. And as far as I know, he got in touch with the sheriff's department. They, in turn, called the Air Force. Then the Air Force got with Dad and swore him to secrecy, and they came out to the ranch and picked up this debris. The wood, I call it wood, I don't know what it was. It was something like balsa wood, but it wouldn't burn, and I couldn't cut it with my knife.
Who had a rancher's knowledge of such things, told his son that, like Major Marcel, he knew the object was not a weather balloon.
He said that's what the Air Force tried to make him believe, that it was a weather balloon. And he said, Bill, he said, it was not a weather balloon. He said, I don't know what it was. But he said it was something altogether different and much bigger.
If the object were only a weather balloon, UFO proponents say, then why did the Air Force pledge Mack Brazel to secrecy? And why did the Air Force pursue his son in the months that followed? Only 22 years old at the time, Bill could not help but be intrigued by his dad's discovery of the strange materials in this field. He searched for and found some remnants of the crashed object.
And I was talking about it. I went into Corona and I was sitting there in a beer joint, and I got these, of course, my friends was asking me if I'd found any more or anything like this. And I said, well, I'd picked up a few scraps. About a cigar box full, and somebody, I don't know, must have informed the Air Force, because first thing I know, I have visitors, and they say they'd like to have this material. And they didn't tell me they'd confiscate it. They just said, well, like we're going to have it one way or the other, you know.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army. Army officers say the missile, found sometime last week, has been inspected at Roswell, New Mexico, and sent to Wright Field, Ohio, for further inspection. Late this afternoon, a bulletin from New Mexico suggested that the widely publicized mystery of the flying saucers may soon be solved. Army Air Force officers reported that one of the strange discs had been found and inspected sometime last week. Our correspondents in Los Angeles and Chicago have been in contact with Army officials endeavoring to obtain all possible late information. Joe Wilson reports to us now from Chicago. The Army may be getting to the bottom of all this talk about the so-called flying saucer. As a matter of fact, the 509th Atomic Bomb Group headquarters at Roswell, New Mexico, reports that it has received one of the discs which landed on a ranch outside Roswell. The disc landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico, and the rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brazel was the man who discovered the saucer. Colonel William Blanchard of the Roswell Air Base refuses to give details of what the flying disc looks like. In Fort Worth, Texas, where the object was first sent, Brigadier General Roger Ramey says that it is being shipped by air to the AAF Research Center at Wright Field, Ohio. A few moments ago, I talked to officials at Wright Field, and they declared that they expect the so-called flying saucer to be delivered there, but that it hasn't arrived as yet. In the meantime, General Ramey describes the object as being of flimsy construction, almost like a box kite. He says that it was so battered that he was unable to determine whether it had a disc form, and he does not indicate its size. Ramey says that so far as can be determined, no one saw the object in the air, and he describes it as being made of some sort of tinfoil. Other Army officials say that further information indicates that the object had a diameter of about 20 to 25 feet, and that nothing in the apparent construction indicated any capacity for speed, and that there was no evidence of a power plant. The disc also appeared too flimsy to carry a man. Now, back to Taylor Grant in New York.